Welcome to my channel. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Thank you so much.
They didn't come to my high school graduation. Not because they were busy, not because they were sick, not even because they forgot. No, they chose not to come. My own parents skipped the day I walked across the stage in a wrinkled rental robe to collect my diploma. The same diploma they once told me I'd never earn, because, and I quote, "We're not wasting gas on a failure." Those words didn't just sting. They stayed. Long after the applause died down, long after the photos were posted and untagged by classmates, long after I drove myself back to the empty apartment I'd been renting by the week. I heard those words every night when I slept in my car, parked behind the 24-hour gym where I pretended to work out just so I could sneak in a shower. And I hear them now, years later, while pouring wine into crystal glasses I didn't even know how to pronounce back then. Glasses I bought myself after closing on a $750,000 house with a guest wing my parents suddenly seemed very interested in. But we'll get to that. My name is Miles, I'm 28, and if you'd told me 10 years ago that my life would look like this, the house, the career, the custom-built mahogany dining table I'm currently setting, I probably would have laughed in your face. Because back then, everything felt like a punchline. I was the youngest of three, the afterthought baby that came along by accident, as my mom once joked at a family barbecue, loud enough for everyone to hear, including me. My older brother, Dean, was the golden child, already working in our dad's HVAC company by 19. My sister, Nicole, was the responsible one, married to her high school sweetheart, pregnant by 22, and always sending group texts about her son's first words like she was announcing a Nobel Prize. And then there was me, the weird one, the one who liked to read, the one who didn't want to inherit the family business, the one who didn't fit in and didn't stop trying to anyway. We grew up in a small town where people still waved at each other from their porches and nothing ever really changed. Our parents ran things like a tight ship, or more accurately, like a cruise ship with a strict first-class/steerage divide. Dean got a truck on his 18th birthday. Nicole got her tuition covered for nursing school. I got a job application for the gas station near the highway and a sermon about pulling my weight. I still remember the exact moment I realized things were different for me. It was sophomore year. I had made the honor roll for the first time, after pulling all-nighters for weeks while juggling shifts at the diner. I came home, excited, clutching the paper certificate like it was a trophy. My mom barely glanced up from folding laundry. "That's what you're supposed to do," she said flatly. Why would we celebrate doing the bare minimum? That phrase, the bare minimum, became her favorite thing to throw at me. Didn't matter what I did. Picked up a double shift? Bare minimum. Got into community college? Bare minimum. Won a scholarship? That's great, but it's only partial, right? Dean could crash his truck into a mailbox and still be just going through a rough patch. Nicole could call screaming about her husband staying out all night, and Mom would say, "Marriage is hard. Sweetie, give him grace." But me? I had to be perfect just to be tolerated. I kept my head down for most of high school. I worked, I studied, I skipped prom because I couldn't afford the tux rental. I didn't complain, not out loud, but inside, I was keeping score. Every missed birthday, every time they laughed at my ideas, every time I walked into the room and the air got 10 degrees colder. They thought I didn't notice. I noticed everything. Graduation was supposed to be different. I wanted it to be. I worked for that day. I scraped together enough credits after failing sophomore geometry, not because I was lazy, but because my shifts kept ending at 2 a.m. and I'd nod off in class. I emailed teachers, begged for makeup tests, clawed my way back to a 3.2 GPA. I even landed a spot speaking at the ceremony. Nothing big, just a 2-minute thank you speech, but it mattered to me. It felt like proof, like I'd finally done something worth noticing. I called my parents 2 weeks before the event and asked if they were coming. My mom sighed like I'd asked her to help me move bodies. "How long is this thing?" she asked. I told her. She said they'd see what they could do. I didn't hear from them again until the morning of. Dean texted me at 10:03 a.m. Ceremony started at 10. It was a selfie of him and Dad on the couch, feet up, beers in hand. Caption: "Gas is too expensive. Good luck, scholar." Laughing emoji. I stared at that photo backstage while other kids fixed their tassels and posed with their proud, crying parents. I didn't cry. I smiled. I walked across that stage with my back straight, shook the principal's hand, and looked out at the empty row of seats I'd reserved for my family. Then I walked to my car and sat there and let the smile crack just a little. It didn't get better after that. They didn't call to ask how the speech went. They didn't mention it when I dropped by a week later to return a lawnmower I borrowed. No one even asked to see pictures. I think Nicole said congrats at some point, in a group chat buried between a photo of her kid holding a juice box and a meme about lazy Gen Z workers. But that was it. The day passed, and they moved on like it never happened. Like I never happened. So I left. I didn't have a plan. I had a beat-up Nissan with 190,000 miles and a duffel bag stuffed with half-folded clothes. I had $2,000 saved from tips. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Just packed up and drove out of that town like it was on fire. First to the city, then to the edge of it, then to a parking lot behind the 24-hour gym where I told myself I was just between places. I'd park late, crack the windows, and curl up with a hoodie over my head. I'd shower in the gym, then sit in the cafe across the street nursing a coffee until my shift at the print shop started. I told people I was staying with friends if they asked. No one ever asked. But I kept going. Took extra shifts. Took freelance jobs. Took rejection after rejection and just kept showing up. Eventually, I built something. First a small business, then a brand, then a life. One brick at a time. One painful, stubborn, impossible brick at a time. And now here I am, in a house with 4 bedrooms, a home office, and the kind of countertops my mom used to cut pictures of from Better Homes and Gardens. I've got a wine rack I don't fully know how to use and a car in the driveway with heated seats. It's not just a house. It's mine. And tonight, that house is going to host 3 people who once told me I wouldn't amount to anything. My phone buzzes. A text from Nicole. Excited for dinner tonight. Can't wait to see the guest wing. She doesn't know that I'm serving a 5-course meal on the plates I bought with my first big client paycheck. She doesn't know I set the table myself, arranged every candle, folded the napkins into little triangles. She doesn't know what I've planned. None of them do. They think I invited them over because I've forgiven them, because I want to show off, because I'm lonely. They're wrong. And I can't wait to see their faces when they find out why they're really here. I won't lie. When I first invited them, I didn't expect them to say yes so quickly. Part of me figured they'd ghost the message like they did my graduation, or forget, the way they forgot to return my calls the week I got laid off from my first job. But no. Within 30 minutes of sending out the invitation, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Nicole responded first, of course, always eager to show she was the cool sibling, the one who could bridge the gap between me and our parents. Her text was followed by a group message from Mom that simply read, "We'll be there. What should we bring?" No apology. No small talk. No acknowledgement that we hadn't spoken in months, maybe years in any meaningful way. Just those 4 words. Like this was some weekend potluck and not the first time they were stepping foot into my life since I stopped being the family punching bag. Dean's response was what sealed it for me. He sent a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. Not a word. Not a question. Just a silent green thumb like I was confirming a pizza order. Typical Dean. He always believed his presence was enough. Like him, simply showing up was a gift to everyone else in the room. The days leading up to the dinner were a blur of quiet, purposeful work. I cleaned the house twice over. Not because I wanted to impress them, not really. It was more like I needed control over something. I scrubbed the guest bathroom tile until my arms ached, polished the floors, tested the lighting in the dining room. Every time I set a fork down or adjusted the chairs, I imagined them walking in, seeing the place, realizing just how wrong they'd been. But that fantasy didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. It didn't erase the years. It didn't fix the way their voices still lived in my head, nagging, laughing, dismissing me like I was some charity case they reluctantly let tag along. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that this dinner was never about reconnecting. It was about recognition. I didn't want hugs. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want a fresh start. I wanted the truth to sit between us like the roast chicken I'd been basting all afternoon. Hot, heavy, and impossible to ignore. And yet, some part of me still hoped they'd surprise me. That maybe, just maybe, they'd show up changed. Softer, wiser, regretful. But they didn't. They pulled up exactly 15 minutes late, in Dad's old SUV that coughed and sputtered as it parked in front of my sleek black hybrid. I stood by the door, watching through the glass as they climbed out one by one. Mom in her usual beige sweater and judgmental gaze. Dean in a baseball cap and aviators even though the sun had already dipped. Nicole in her fun ant blouse, carrying a bottle of cheap wine like it was a peace offering. "Wow," she said the moment I opened the door, her voice already high-pitched and fake. "This place is gorgeous, Miles. You've really done well for yourself." "Thanks," I said, stepping aside to let them in. "Glad you could make it." Mom brushed past me without a word, immediately surveying the foyer like she was evaluating a house on some real estate show. "Open concept," she muttered. "Very modern." Dean didn't say anything, just gave me a chin nod before heading straight for the living room and plopping onto the couch. Shoes still on, legs spread like he owned the place. Nicole was the only one who lingered, giving me a quick hug that felt more like a pat on the back. "Seriously, Miles," she whispered. "This is amazing. I mean, who would have thought, right?" I blinked. "Who would have thought?" "Oh, you know what I mean." She laughed nervously and waved it off. "Let's eat. I'm starving." Dinner was civil. Barely. They complimented the food in the way someone might compliment a store-bought cake. Polite, shallow, and without any real appreciation. Dean kept asking if I had ESPN or NFL Red Zone. Mom asked why I didn't have curtains in the dining room, as if that was the most pressing issue in the world. Nicole made little comments about the neighborhood energy and how safe it felt, which I'm pretty sure was a backhanded way of saying white. I tried to steer the conversation gently at first. Asked about their lives, how the business was going, how Nicole's son was doing. But every answer circled back to some complaint. Business was slow. Employees were lazy. Nicole's husband might be cheating again. Mom's back hurt. Dean's knee hurt. The whole evening began to feel like a walking tour through their misery. And yet, none of it surprised me. What had surprised me was what came next. We'd just finished dessert, a chocolate tart I made from scratch, when Mom cleared her throat and placed her fork down with dramatic precision. "Miles," she said, "we need to talk to you about something." I froze. My gut tightened. "Okay." Nicole looked at Dean, who gave her a lazy shrug. "We were hoping," she began, "that maybe you could help us out a bit. Just temporarily." "Help you out how?" "Well," she smiled, that smile she always used when asking for favors. "The one that made you feel guilty before you said no. We've been going through a rough patch. You know how it is. The business isn't what it used to be, and with everything getting so expensive." Mom jumped in. "Your father and I are thinking of selling the house. It's too much upkeep. And with our retirement delayed again, we just can't keep up." I stared at them. "And?" Dean leaned back in his chair. "They need a place to stay. Not forever. Just until they get back on their feet." "And you thought of me." Mom pursed her lips. "We are family, Miles." The irony hit me like a slap. Family? Now they wanted to play the family card? "You ignored my graduation," I said quietly. "You told people I was a dropout." Nicole's smile faltered. "That was a long time ago." "Not that long." Dean rolled his eyes. "Come on, man. It's not like we kicked your dog. Everyone says stupid stuff sometimes." I looked at each of them. My mother, who once told me I'd be lucky to end up managing a Dollar Tree. My brother, who made fun of my car until it broke down and then mocked me for not having enough saved to fix it. My sister, who once lent me $50 for textbooks and brought it up at every holiday meal for 2 years. Now they sat in my dining room, drinking my wine, eating my food, asking for shelter like it was owed to them. "I'm not saying you have to make a decision tonight," Mom said, folding her napkin neatly. "We just thought, since you've got all this space. That guest wing, it's going unused, isn't it?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, it wasn't. It was surreal. It was delusional. "You skipped my graduation," I repeated. "Do you even remember what you said to me that day?" Nicole looked uncomfortable. Dean shrugged. Mom blinked. "We didn't mean it. You said you wouldn't waste gas on a failure." The room went still. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant sound of a neighbor's car alarm chirping. My own breath, slow and shallow. "We didn't think you'd take it so personally," Mom said finally, and I swear, she said it with a straight face. That was it. That was the moment. The switch. The line that snapped something in me I didn't know was still hanging on. It wasn't just that they were asking for help. It was how they were asking. Like I owed it to them. Like the past had been wiped clean just because they were uncomfortable now. There was no apology. No self-awareness. Just entitlement wrapped in fake smiles and cheap wine. They didn't come to my graduation because I wasn't worth the gas. Now they wanted to live here, in the home I built without a cent of their help. They expected to stroll into the guest wing like nothing had happened, like I hadn't bled for every inch of this life, like they weren't the very reason I had to climb so far just to breathe. I stood slowly, collecting the plates. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. "Thanks for coming," I said. Dean frowned. "Wait, that's it. We're not done talking," Mom added, her tone sharp now, defensive. "Yes," I said, looking at her directly. "We are." Nicole stood up too, her face pink with embarrassment or anger. I couldn't tell. "Miles, don't be dramatic. We're trying to fix things." "No," I said, placing the dishes in the sink. "You're trying to benefit from things. That's not the same." They didn't move at first. I think they were waiting for me to crack, to laugh, to say it was a joke, and of course they could stay. But I didn't. I walked them to the door. I opened it. I waited. And just before Mom stepped out, she turned and looked at me with that same pinched face she used to give me when I came home with a B+ instead of an A. "You're going to regret this," she said. "Family is all you have in the end." I didn't say what I was thinking, that sometimes family is exactly what you need to escape from. I just nodded. The door closed behind them. And that's when I knew. They still had no idea why I'd really invited them. They still had no idea what I had planned. And they were about to find out. After the door clicked shut behind them, I stood there for a long time. Longer than I care to admit. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't punch the wall like some movie character trying to prove he's still got fire in him. I just stood in the quiet, alone with the hum of the house and the echo of my mother's voice. "You're going to regret this." And for a minute, maybe 5, I wondered if she was right. Because the truth is, I didn't feel powerful or righteous after kicking them out. I felt hollow, like I'd ripped out a part of myself and wasn't sure if it was the sickness or the cure. Even after everything they did, part of me still craved their approval. Some small, desperate part of me still wanted to hear, "We're proud of you, Miles." Even if I knew it would be forced, even if it was 10 years too late. That's the thing about growing up ignored. You become fluent in silence, but deep down, you never stop hoping someone will finally listen. But no one was listening that night. No one ever had. And that was the part one needed to face. I didn't sleep much. Poured myself a glass of water, sat on the couch, and stared out the window at the dark driveway where their taillights had vanished. That house, my house, suddenly felt too big, too clean, like a museum exhibit called Man Who Made It. It didn't feel like home. Not yet. The days after were a blur. Not because nothing happened, but because everything did. They started slow, just little things. A missed call from Nicole. A group text from Mom asking if we could talk things through like adults. Dean sent a meme about family feuds, followed by a LOL and nothing else. I didn't respond to any of it. Then came the guilt trips. Mom left a voicemail 2 minutes long, sniffling through most of it, saying she was sorry I felt like they hadn't supported me. Not sorry for what they did, sorry for how I felt. Classic. Nicole emailed me a long message about rebuilding bridges, complete with a Bible quote and 3 different ways to forgive. Dean didn't say much, but I heard through a cousin that he called me ungrateful at a barbecue and said I wasn't raised to act like this. That part made me laugh. I wasn't raised at all. I survived. But then came the escalation. It started with Mom reaching out to my landlord. Only, she didn't know I wasn't renting anymore, that I owned this place. She left a message trying to warn them about my mental state and how I'd become hostile to family. When that didn't work, she started contacting old friends of mine on Facebook. Sent them long paragraphs about how she was worried I'd joined a cult, or worse, gone off the deep end with all that money. One of them sent me screenshots. I read every word, mouth tight, heart pounding. She made me sound like I was spiraling. Dangerous. A threat. All because I said no. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, except the car was my past trying to rear-end the life I'd built. I thought about confronting her. I thought about writing a long, articulate letter laying out every memory, every insult, every moment she'd turned her back on me. But I didn't. Because by then, something inside me had shifted. Something hard, but necessary. I stopped trying to get even. I stopped trying to be understood. I started focusing on the only thing I could control. Me. Let me back up. The road to this house, this stability, wasn't paved with sudden windfalls or viral moments. It was built brick by brick, during the years no one was watching. It started after high school, when I left town with nothing but a duffel bag, an old laptop, and a notebook full of ideas. I lived in my car for almost 5 months. Not because I didn't try to find places, but because the jobs I could get with no degree and no real experience didn't pay enough for rent and food and gas. So I made a choice. I'd shower at the gym, sleep in my car, and use the rest to keep learning. I'd spend hours on free Wi-Fi at cafes watching tutorials on web design, marketing, SEO. Anything I could teach myself. I signed up for every freelance site I could find. Took bottom-of-the-barrel gigs just to build a portfolio. Designed logos for local bands. Wrote taglines for Etsy stores. Edited photos for college kids who wanted to look more professional on LinkedIn. Nothing glamorous. But it paid. Slowly. I remember one gig in particular. A woman selling hand-knit scarves asked me to create a brand name and logo for her shop. She paid me $15. I spent 6 hours on it. When I sent it to her, she replied, "This is perfect. I feel like a real business now." I didn't cry then, but I did sit there in my car, holding my phone, realizing for the first time that maybe I wasn't useless. Maybe I could do this. That scarf gig turned into a referral. Then another. Then 10. Eventually, I moved into a studio apartment with mold on the ceiling and a window that didn't shut all the way. But it was mine. I bought a secondhand desk, taped a vision board to the wall, and told myself that one day, I'd have a space that felt like success. Not just looked like it. Felt like it. I kept working, day and night. Built a small client base. Then a website. Then a brand of my own. I didn't just do design anymore. I started consulting. Helping small businesses grow. Figuring out what made people care. The more I did it, the more I realized. I was good at this. Not gifted, not genius. Just relentlessly obsessed with getting better. I read books. Took courses. Invested every extra dollar into learning. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I didn't want their validation anymore. I wanted proof. Tangible, irrefutable proof that I wasn't the screw-up they said I was. By 25, I had a steady stream of clients. By 26, I had enough to hire 2 part-time assistants. By 27, I signed a long-term contract with a startup that exploded in popularity and took me with it. I cashed my first 5-figure invoice and bought this house a year later. It wasn't flashy, not really, but it was mine. Every inch of it earned. Every tile, every light fixture, every quiet, peaceful room. But what I didn't earn, what I had to rebuild, was my sense of worth. That part was slower. See, success is loud on the outside but quiet on the inside. You hit a milestone and everyone claps, but inside you're still that kid waiting for someone to say, "You matter." And no amount of income or square footage fills that gap if you don't deal with it. So I went to therapy. Yeah, real talk. I found a counselor who specialized in family trauma and met with her every week. I told her everything. About the silence, the favoritism, the subtle cruelty that wore me down more than any single blow ever could. She helped me name things. Gaslighting, emotional neglect, scapegoating. Words I'd never used before because I thought what I went through was just a tough childhood. But no, it was real. And naming it didn't make me weak. It made me free. I started journaling, meditating, doing small things that made me feel seen, even if only by myself. I'd take myself out for dinner and leave the phone in my pocket. I'd buy books without guilt. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. And slowly, I started to rise. Not just financially, emotionally. I stopped chasing people who never clapped for me. I built friendships with people who knew me as I was, not as I used to be. People who didn't expect me to shrink so they could shine. People who celebrated my wins like they were their own. I began to smile more. Real smiles. I hosted dinners, not for revenge, but for connection. I donated to scholarships for kids like me. Quietly. Anonymously. Not for credit. Just because I knew what it felt like to be forgotten. And one night, sitting in my backyard under the string lights I hung by hand, I realized something. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't whole either. Not yet. But I was healing. Which brings me back to now. To the guest wing. The one my family suddenly finds so fascinating. The one they think is just an empty space in a big house I barely deserve. They don't know what that wing was originally for. They don't know the promise I made to myself when I bought this place. They don't know who that room was really built for. But they're about to find out. Because I didn't just invite them over for a meal. I invited them for the reveal. The night after I kicked them out, I didn't sleep. Not from guilt. That part had finally started to rot away, but from something else. Something new. Something sharp and electric under my skin. I couldn't name it at first. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, arms folded behind my head, and listened to the sounds of the house breathing around me. The soft hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of the hardwood. Then it clicked. It was clarity. A rare, dangerous kind. I had spent most of my life reacting to their jabs, their silence, their games. Surviving. Adapting. Minimizing myself to avoid taking up too much space at the dinner table. But now, I had something they'd never given me before, control. Not just over my life, but over the narrative. Over their narrative. For the first time, I wasn't the disappointment. I was the wild card, the one they underestimated. And they had no idea what I was capable of. And that was going to be my advantage. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to confront them in some explosive family therapy session where we aired decades of dysfunction in front of a mediator. No, that would give them a stage. I didn't want a stage. I wanted a setup. Something slow. Something clean. Something that would make them question not just what they said to me, but who they were. I started planning the next morning. Step 1 was simple. Play nice. I responded to Nicole's email first. Kept it short. Casual. Told her I'd been overwhelmed and needed a few days to clear my head. I said I was open to talking things through, maybe even having them over again soon. She replied within minutes. Said she was so glad I was coming around. Said she knew we were stronger than this and that family could always come back together. I could almost hear the smug relief in her tone. She probably thought she'd cracked me. Good. Dean was trickier. He didn't do heart-to-hearts. He did beer, football, and passive-aggressive sarcasm. So I texted him. You were right. I overreacted. Let's talk soon. Maybe over a game. He sent back a gif of The Rock raising his eyebrow and a thumbs up. Close enough. Mom didn't answer when I called. Typical. But she texted me later that night. I'm glad you're taking responsibility. We love you, Miles. Taking responsibility. That one made me laugh. But I let it slide. Because this wasn't about correcting the past anymore. This was about revealing it. Here's the thing about people like them. People who've gotten away with treating others like garbage for years. They rely on memory gaps. Selective amnesia. They count on you either forgetting or giving up. The goal of my revenge wasn't to hurt them. It was to remind them. Painfully. Publicly. Permanently. So I began collecting. Emails. Texts. Screenshots. Old report cards with passive-aggressive notes scrawled in the margins. That one birthday card from Mom where she forgot my name and crossed out Micah. The voicemail where she called me a leech for asking for help with college books. Dean's old Facebook post making fun of me for trying to get famous with logos. Nicole's group message where she joked about Miles being the next Steve Jobs, just without the brain cells. I didn't have to dig deep. Most of it was still sitting there. Never deleted. Because they never thought I'd come back. I even tracked down Mr. Reynolds, my high school guidance counselor, who'd pulled me aside once and quietly said, "You deserve better than what you're getting at home." I hadn't spoken to him in over a decade, but he remembered me. "You were the quiet one," he said when I called. Polite. Sharp. Like you were carrying something heavy all the time. I laughed. I was. He ended up writing me a statement. Nothing formal. Just a letter of recollection. About how my parents never showed up for meetings. How I once came to school in the winter with no coat. How he called them. Twice. And never got a reply. It was small. But it mattered. Everything did. Because all of this, every screenshot, every story, every skipped holiday and missed phone call, was becoming something bigger than them. Bigger than me. A presentation. You see, I had an idea. I've always been a storyteller. It's what made me good at branding, at helping businesses figure out how to sell themselves. And now, I was going to do the same, but in reverse. I was going to hold up a mirror so detailed they couldn't look away. But for that, I needed one more piece. The house. Specifically, the guest wing. They were so obsessed with it. Nicole had already mentioned it twice in our short email chain, asking what I planned to do with it, how cozy it looked from the photos. Mom had said something snide about how all that unused space could be such a blessing for someone in need. Dean joked that it would be a great place for his home gym if he ever moved in. I let them imagine it. Because what they didn't know was that the guest wing wasn't built for guests. Not originally. When I bought the house, that side of the property was basically a bare-bones extension, unfinished, dusty, filled with potential. And I poured months of work into it. Not just cash, but design. I made it beautiful, but I made it mine. At first, I was going to turn it into a rental, maybe a home office. But during one of my therapy sessions, I'd had an idea. A strange, slightly dramatic, extremely me idea. I was going to make it a memory room. Not in the cheesy, candlelit way, but as a monument. A quiet, personal museum of everything I'd lived through and built past. A visual timeline of becoming. There was a long hallway, now lined with framed milestones. My GED, my first freelance paycheck, a blurry photo of me grinning in front of my car after I'd fixed the bumper myself. A college acceptance email I never sent to anyone because I knew they'd just ask how I planned to pay for it. My therapist called it reclamation. I called it proof. At the end of that hallway, there was a room. Quiet. Bright. A desk. A video screen. And that's where the real setup would happen. I didn't want to humiliate them. I wanted them to see themselves. So I started putting it together, a film of sorts. Edited like a documentary. Voiceovers. Photos. Messages read aloud by AI-generated voices. Audio snippets layered under soft piano music. I made it elegant. Professional. Personal. It began with footage of my graduation. Not mine, but stock footage. Kids in caps and gowns. Families cheering. Overlaid with the voicemail mom left that day. We're not wasting gas on a failure. Then it moved into my early years. Yearbook photos. Childhood art. The school note about how I'd shown up late 27 times in a semester because no one would drive me. Then it shifted. The car, the gym, the freelance work. A steady climb. A heartbeat. Finally, the house. My voice, calm and steady. You taught me I didn't deserve anything. So I built everything. It ended with a black screen and a simple message. The guest wing you wanted was never for you. I showed it to my therapist. She cried. I showed it to a friend. He offered to produce a version for YouTube. I declined. Not yet. This wasn't for the world. This was for them. And that's when I sent the invitation. A follow-up dinner. Just the four of us again. I framed it like reconciliation. Let's really talk this time, I wrote. No walls up. Just honesty. And I have something I want to show you all. Mom replied with a smiley face. Nicole with 2 heart emojis. Dean just said, cool. What time? I set the date. Cleaned the wing. Prepared the room. And when the night came, I lit the candles again. I poured the wine. I set the table. And when they walked in, all smiles and passive-aggressive comments about the driveway being too steep and the weird modern artwork, I welcomed them. Because tonight wasn't about arguing. It was about watching. And after the plates were cleared and the wine had started to work its way into their bloodstream, I stood up and smiled. There's something I want you to see, I said. And I led them down the hallway. Each step echoing with years they couldn't remember, but that I never forgot. Each frame on the wall a moment they dismissed, but I'd reclaimed. Each breath tighter. Each footstep heavier. Until we reached the door. And I opened it. They stepped inside. The lights dimmed. And the screen flickered on. And they had no idea what was about to hit them. They say you never really remember what someone said to you. Only how they made you feel. But that was never true for me. I remembered everything they ever said. So when the projector screen lit up in that quiet room, my guest wing, my sanctuary, my proof, and the first words echoed off the walls, we're not wasting gas on a failure. I watched them freeze. Dean furrowed his brow first, like he couldn't quite believe it. Nicole's face twitched, a polite smile flickering into confusion. Mom didn't blink, just narrowed her eyes, trying to process what she was hearing. The footage rolled on. There were no actors, no reenactments, just cold, hard facts. A slow, methodical unraveling of everything they thought I'd forgotten. Each segment was a memory. Each memory was a receipt. A screenshot of Dean's old group text, mocking my little logos and sad websites. A voicemail from Nicole where she called me so sensitive after I broke down on the phone the day Dad told me to man up or move out. A scanned copy of the report from school where I listed hunger as one of my biggest distractions in class. The audio of my mom saying, if he wants college so bad, maybe he should sell his books for tuition. Over it all, my narration. Calm, clear, no bitterness in my voice, just truth. Lined up like dominoes, and every second knocked the next down with merciless grace. This is not a pity story, I said, my voice playing over footage of my car parked behind the gym. This is about remembering. This is about clarity. This is about what happens when silence becomes survival and survival becomes power. At first, they didn't speak. Nicole shifted in her chair, her arms wrapped tight around herself like she was bracing for an earthquake. Dean sat stiff, jaw clenched, avoiding my eyes. Mom stared straight ahead, lips pursed into a line as thin as her patience. Then came the turning point. Footage of the house, the one we were sitting in. Each corner, each detail. My hands placing furniture, choosing paint, fixing light fixtures. A time-lapse of me building a life without them. A voiceover. I built this place as proof. Not just that I made it, but that I made it without you. And then, the last message. Black screen. White text. This guest wing was built to honor the people who lifted me up, not the ones who held me down. The lights came back on, and I turned to face them. No anger. No smug smile. Just silence. Dean was the first to crack. What the hell is this, man? I looked at him. The truth. This is twisted, Nicole snapped. You invited us here just to embarrass us? I invited you here, I said, to see me. Really see me. Maybe for the first time. Mom stood slowly, her voice cold. You've always been dramatic, Miles. Always the victim. I met her eyes. I stopped being the victim when I stopped chasing your love. That silenced her. I let the quiet stretch. Let them sit in it. Let them feel the weight I'd carried for decades, the weight they gave me. Dean scoffed. So what, you're cutting us off? That it? No, I said, tilting my head. That happened a long time ago. You just didn't notice. Nicole blinked fast, her voice softening. But we're family. You're strangers, I replied. Strangers who used to know a version of me you helped break. They didn't know what to say. They weren't used to this, Miles. Calm, collected, standing in his own house, surrounded by his own story, unshaken by their disapproval. Finally, Mom turned to leave. We came here hoping to reconnect. You came here hoping to take, I said, stepping aside to open the door. Like you always do. Nicole lingered. I'm sorry, she mumbled. If that means anything. I nodded. It does. Just not enough. Dean paused in the doorway. This is cold, man. You'll regret it. I smiled, a small, honest one. No. I'll remember it. That's the difference. And just like that, they were gone. No slamming doors. No screaming matches. Just silence. The same silence they gave me all those years. But this time, it felt different. It felt like peace. I stood there for a while after they left, watching the projector screen fade to black. The room smelled faintly of lavender and wine. The candles were still flickering. The house was quiet again, but not empty. It was full of something else now. Closure. They had finally seen it. Not just the house. Not just the success. Me. They had seen what they built when they tried to break me. And they couldn't unsee it. In the weeks that followed, I heard very little. A message from Nicole asking if we could start over someday. A half-hearted apology from Dean buried under a meme about tough love. Mom didn't say a word. Not directly. But I heard she was telling people I'd changed, like it was a bad thing. Maybe I had. Maybe I had become someone they couldn't recognize. Someone who didn't need their approval. Someone who didn't mistake family for obligation. Someone who didn't invite ghosts to live in his guest wing. And maybe that was the revenge all along. Not the film. Not the reveal. But the fact that I no longer carried the weight of wanting them to care. That I had finally, fully let go. Not to spite them. To free myself. Because when you stop chasing people who never clapped for you, you start hearing the applause from within. And that sound, it's louder than anything they'll ever say again. I poured the wine, set the table, and told the story they spent their lives pretending didn't exist. And when the credits rolled, they finally understood why they were never invited to the happy ending.
Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to like and subscribe for new content.